Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my friend, Grady Gibbs.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I am going to, yeah. So I wanted to call this talk, Organizational Change is Hard, so Don't Do It.
Joe
And of course,
overruled.
that doesn't, yeah, Joe overruled me, and fairly enough, because it didn't tie to devices. But the message will tie to devices. I do want to acknowledge that this is always a difficult kind of conversation to have when you're talking about positioning and marketing in front of an expert like Joe. So I just want everybody to know I'm wearing my asbestos onesie today, so that if I get any flames from Joe or any of the other attendees, that I will at least be I will be protected.
We call this bait and switch. We promise one talk. They show up and
No,
let guys.
absolutely,
Talk about whatever you want.
No, it absolutely is going to tie to the device world. And what it boils down to is, if you look at your LinkedIn feed, if you think about what you hear and see in marketing, everything in our culture is glorifying change agents, change. Some new CEO takes over a company, and part of the bio is all about how they instituted some major organizational change at the previous employer. I joke with people, one of my work colleagues, Scott Henderson's on this call today. I've joked with him that my LinkedIn feed is about 40% hustle and grind pornographers and about 40% change agent warrior poets. And the hustle and grind guys, you know what I'm talking about. You got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and chug 4 espressos and hit the gym for an hour. And you've got to grind in order to succeed in life. I find that message off-putting. Most of us don't want to live like that. But the others are these people who glorify themselves as change agents, and we're going to drive change and so forth. And I think there's a significant miss in terms of how we talk to people that we want to adopt our technology, our device, adopt our service, etc. And my case study is going to be a little company some of you probably never heard of, called Tesla. Now, Tesla manufactures a green EV. All of their products are electric vehicles. There's the whole green angle to it, reducing carbon footprint and so forth. But if you look at Tesla's way of talking about their cars and talking about the company, they don't ever talk about any of that. In fact, they don't even talk about the fact that the car's an EV, right? And they're certainly not pushing the carbon reduction angle. What they talk about is what a cool car this is, how fast it accelerates, how fun it is to drive, how cool you will be driving a Tesla. And if you compare it to the typical sort of midlife crisis car that men buy to attract inappropriately aged women and play out whatever fantasies they have about no longer being middle-aged, the typical one that people would do in the US is a Corvette. And yet a Tesla will take off and leave a Corvette in a race, right? A Tesla, I've only ridden in them. I don't own one because I'm resisting change myself. But you can actually get a chiropractic adjustment in a Tesla with the acceleration. They accelerate so fast that it'll pop your neck and give you a little bit of an adjustment.
So you're saying it's a medical device?
With that?
You're saying it can be classified as a medical device?
A class 4, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So the point I'm making here is that the people that you are talking to, whether they're purchasing, administrators in a hospital system, physicians, administrators within a clinical practice, all of these people are part of our culture, where they hear about how important and how glorifying change is and how we should all embrace change, and yet they don't do it. In our personal lives, most of us have reasons for avoiding change. And so what I see a lot of is a revolutionary new device that's going to change your whole life. Everything about your life is going to be better when you adopt our device. And what they're missing, in my opinion, is that a lot of people just don't want to change or have other reasons why they can't change. And positioning your product as this revolutionary thing is actually counterproductive. And there's a great movie. I know Joe has seen this, probably has it on DVD. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Newman and Redford as the title characters. In that movie, there is a character who is traveling the West. This is, of course, set in the Old West. He's traveling the West selling bicycles, right? And this is this great new technology that he's going to bring to these dirt street towns where most people either walk or ride wagons and horses. And he has this sales pitch that I just think is classic. He says, look, I don't want to oversell this product, but it's all it will do is improve your life in every way. But that's all it's going to do. And I feel like some of what we see is out there. So obviously resistance to change comes from lots of different reasons, lots of different, some of its personality, some of its risk avoidance, et cetera. If you think about the hospital administrator type of person, a chief nursing officer who might have to sign off on your device, a physician who chairs a committee about adopting new technology and so forth, what they are typically in is a world in which if we adopt some new approach, some new technology, and it succeeds, we save some lives, we save the hospital a lot of money, we improve reimbursement. Something that we do is a tremendous benefit because I championed your technology to my organization. What does that administrator get for that? Attaboy, attagirl, whatever the appropriate term would be. It's a pat on the back, right? But what if by encouraging the adoption of your technology, I actually decrease patient care? Patients die, God forbid. The hospital loses millions of dollars because we adopted your technology. I'm now looking for a job, right? I've been fired and no reference for my next job and so forth. So what you have to consider is that people are weighing the risk benefit on a personal level. I get almost nothing helping you get this adopted, but I'm risking my job if it doesn't work out, okay? And that is going to create a problem for you. When you're talking about physicians, specifically physicians, there's a cultural thing that I think we all have to face. And I never hear anybody talking about this. That doesn't mean people don't know about it or don't talk about it. I just haven't heard it. But there is a cultural thing that goes on in medical training that discourages innovation and creativity and being the first to do something. There is a cultural embrace of the idea of best practices, risk avoidance. We've all taken the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm, right? So the idea is that I want to see other people succeed with your product before I'll even think about it.
Mm-hmm. Social
and
proof.
That is absolutely, and it's why the key opinion leader approach works in healthcare in ways that it doesn't work in a lot of other industries. In other words, a lot of physicians are looking for that double-blinded, randomized controlled trial type approach. They're looking for key opinion leaders to endorse the product and so forth because they don't want to be that. What do you call when you graduated from medical school but you're still in training? Resident, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit of cognitive decline here. You don't want to be that resident who pipes up and makes a suggestion, throws out an idea, and gets slapped around by the lead doctor, and that happens, right? And then, of course, there's a workflow component to both in an OR environment, a clinical practice especially, workflow is primary. And so what happens is you may be telling me how great your device is or what problem you solve or how you're going to revolutionize the care of the patient. But if you're not addressing how this impacts my workflow, chances are good that I'm just not going to be interested because I don't want to disrupt the day-to-day operations of my OR, the day-to-day operations of my clinical practice. Joe, you're looking skeptical. Have I lost you?
No, not at all. I'm thinking
Okay.
through what you're saying.
So where some of this came from in our business, Expand MD is one of the companies that I'm a shareholder in. Expand provides population health infrastructure for both clinical practices and hospital systems that need to get something done and don't currently have the people, expertise, resources, et cetera, to do it. And a classic example of this is a product I'm very, very proud of, and that is cognitive assessments. Most doctors, if you get a 3-minute conversation, will say, absolutely, I wish I had a better way of assessing early cognitive decline. I mean, by the time someone can't draw the hands on a clock, right? We all know that cognitive test. You give the patient the 1 through 12 in a circle and tell them to draw the hands on a clock to make it 3:30 or something. Of course, you can't do any of this for the millennials because they don't know about clocks with hands on them. But you know, for your Medicare patients, you can tell them, you know, draw a clock that shows me 3:30. Well, by the time a patient gets to the point where they can't draw those hands on a clock, they are so far gone that it's typically obvious that they've got cognitive decline, and there's really not much to diagnose, right? What doctors all want, at least in our conversations, what they all want to be able to catch it early is the fact that you've lost your keys to your car a couple of times in the last month. Is that a sign of cognitive decline, or is it just a natural, you're busy, you forgot, it's no big deal? Example a minute ago when I couldn't think of the word resident, right? I'm in healthcare. I know that term, I know that word, but I couldn't bring it to mind. Is that a sign that at 57, I've started the long, slow twilight of Alzheimer's coming on? Or is that just, you know, I'm a little nervous because I'm waiting for Joe to slap me around, right? I mean,
come on, man. Don't play me like that.
Someone has to be the foil for the joke, right? Yeah. But the point is, what is that I'm dealing with now? In the traditional approach to cognitive assessment, there are, at least that I know of, 5 or 6 good computerized cognitive assessments that you can give the patient a link. The patient opens it up. They take a series of assessments. You know, here's 15 words. Now we're going to do a little exercise. We're going to put 30 words back up on the screen. How many of the original 15 words can you remember? Okay, those sorts of little exercises. The software tracks how quickly you respond. So if I tell you to type in a capital Q, how long does it take the patient to hit the shift bar and the Q letter or hit the space bar and so forth? These things assess cognition. And so this is something almost any doctor wants to do. Now, my colleague who's on the call is actually the program manager for this service in our company. 9 out of 10 physicians who speak to him about the cognitive assessment will sign up. Yes, give me this. You know, it's like a free trial. I can test sort of 5 patients and see how it works. Absolutely, I want it. What then happens is that in order to get reimbursed, in order to get valid test results, you have to have someone, and it's typically an MA in a clinical practice, proctor the test. Now, that doesn't mean they have to stand over the patient and watch them take the test, but they have to be accessible to the patient, which typically means they need to be in the room with them and answer questions, help them if they get confused, you know, explain what the next set of instructions is, and so forth. Well, go into your favorite PCP's office and ask to borrow one of the MAs for 30 minutes, that you're just going to take them down the hall and get them a cup of coffee, and watch the resistance to, I need my MAs rooming patients. I need my MAs getting people out of rooms and checked out and pay their copay and so forth. I need to keep my workflow going. And the last thing I have time for is to assign 3 or 4 times a day one of the MAs to stop whatever he or she is doing and stand over a patient for 30 minutes. They don't have it. So our approach is called a done-for-you cognitive assessment. So our people actually call the patient and sit on hold while the patient takes the test, and our proctors know the test, know what screen you're looking at, can walk you through the experience, explain things, correct mistakes, and so forth, so that we get a valid result, and it's now billable or reimbursable because it was a proctored experience. Now, rather than present this as this revolutionary way to assess cognition and save your early decline, early dementia patients from a life of misery and you know, all the age in place kind of conversation, what we do is we position this as if your MA did the work. It's no change to the workflow, because it's like having an extra person on demand who proctors the tests for you. So all you're doing is exactly what you want to do or would have done in the past, which is assess cognition, but you're doing it with no change to workflow. In other words, we're making this something that is not revolutionary, it's not change, it's not new, it's not different. It's simply the way the process works that allows you to continue doing what you're doing without disruption. And what we find is, the 9 out of 10 sign up for the computerized assessment test. 9 out of those 9 never get past the free trial. Because once they experience the damage to workflow, they experience the impact of having an employee tied up for 30 minutes, they're not interested in continuing the work. So even though they could get better results for their patients with early onset, they're not pursuing it because it just blows up workflow. When we do the done for you component for them, literally 100% of those physicians move to, I've done my 5 free tests to see how this works. I love it. I can't wait to do more. And they progress with us and do business. And so for me, I think there's so much that we miss in the device world because we get excited. We, as I like to say, we get high on our own supply, right? We chug our own Kool-Aid. We are excited about this revolutionary new thing that we've created. Maybe not me personally, but my engineers have come up with some ingenious way to make life better. And I can't wait to tell everybody how this is going to change the world. It's the bicycle in the Old West. It's going to do nothing but change your life for the better in every way, right? And what I'm challenging people to do is think about ways that you can position your product not as a new thing, a revolutionary thing. It's an evolutionary change, an improvement on a current process. It's very much what you are doing now. So I'm looking at Sue Carr, for example, who has a really incredibly interesting product to me that built into her device is the filter to keep glass shards from an ampule from getting into the syringe that I'm then going to add to your IV, right? And this, the last thing I want in a NICU is to inject glass shards into an infant and cause some sort of, lung embolism or whatever other bad outcomes. The idea of a glass shard scares me, and I'm not scared of anything. But her device does that with no needle. The needle is not visible. Obviously there's a needle involved, but it's not something that projects and can prick the finger of the nurse or the physician or whoever's doing this injection. So in a way, this is a revolutionary change. In a way, there's absolutely, Sue could step out there and say, we are totally changing the world. Pardon me. But I'm going to argue that when she does that, people are going to look at that and say, well, let me wait and see when Mayo adopts this. Let me wait and see if the NICU across town that we compete with adopts this technology. And once they've tried it out, proven that it's a good technology, then we'll give it a shot.
Grady, what do you think
There's
about key opinion leaders? Is that enough? Like the most known, I don't know, pulmonologist, anesthesiologist that uses needles all the time. Is that enough, or do we need to wait until Mayo re-ups their order?
I think Sue has the potential to do a reverse KOL. Rather than go for the ranking sort of well-published, well-regarded academic medicine department chair at, the prestigious medical center tied to some university medical school, I think where she wants to go is nurses. In other words, take a guerrilla marketing approach with more of a mass market feel of, someone in what looks clearly like a nursing uniform, holding up their hand saying, look, Ma, no needle sticks, right? Almost like, a play on the look, Ma, no hands on the bicycle thing. Like no needle sticks, it's the safer approach. But I think if she ties it directly to what is already happening, people are opening ampules, filtering the solution and injecting it into the IV all day, every day, millions of times. Sue's got the stats on that. It's a multi-billion-dollar market because it's done all the time. So rather than position this as something revolutionary and completely different and all of that, it's just an evolution. It's the next step in the way we already do a process. We're just going to make that process a little smoother, less risky, et cetera.
I'm thinking that was the last slide, so we would just look at one another, unless you have a fourth.
Oh, that wasn't my slide, but I got
needle pricks is the primary benefit for Sue's product, though. I don't know if I would go with that campaign. Yes, it's a benefit, but it's not about that. It's about glass shards in patients.
Right,
Susie? Yeah.
But how is that better than filtering now? In other words, now you're in a conversation about changing workflow, where I feel like nurses who say, I don't want to be stuck. I have a colleague on the other floor who stuck her own hand using a needle, drives a grassroots encouragement, because then what you're doing is de-risking the acquisition of Sue's technology for the administrative purchasing type of person who now doesn't have to risk a riot in the nursing suite. The nurses aren't going to be mad at me for bringing in this new technology. They're actually asking me to do this. I think you've now de-risked that transaction, because
conversation about it, because I hear what you're saying, and I'm interpreting you saying that the perceived benefit to the purchaser is greater if we make it about him or her, as opposed to about patient care. That's what I'm hearing you say. Me not getting stuck resonates with me more than I'm helping my patient not have glass in her veins.
And simply because there is currently
a show of hands who agrees that not getting stuck yourself is a bigger benefit than some abstract, I'm not going to get glass in my patient's veins. Boss came on special to say that.
Yep. It's what's in it for me.
I know, but
my past life was all about adoption of medical technologies, and the what's in it for me part of this can be a huge factor.
Also, the chances of having this happen to somebody, though they're existent, are relatively small. But if you're giving injection after injection after injection, the chances of sticking yourself are actually quite high.
Did he change your direction in terms of how you were going to go to market with this conversation?
Not really. I think what he said was important for the healthcare provider or the administrator, but we actually conducted clinical trials in Frederick, and we had a bunch of labor and delivery nurses come out and try it out, who just fell in love with it and can't wait for it to get on the market because it's easier. But for me, it's my passion. My why is
not about you. Not about you, of course.
Glass shards from getting to the patient. So if you think about every little baby that had SIDS or was getting TPNs and died, if you look at their autopsy, a lot of times if they're getting total parenteral nutrition, they'll find glass shards in their lungs and stomach, because a lot of TPNs are, use a lot of ampules.
I'm thinking that few people know that. While it's, and then you be spending your marketing dollars saying, did you know how many babies die from this? Which sounds a lot like,
and you're overcoming the natural inclination to say, well, that doesn't happen to my babies because I'm properly filtering my
hospital.
That doesn't happen to us because we're doing it right.
But
I think there's also
one nurse to deliver 10 babies that night and to forget to filter all of them, and those 10 babies, have the chance of glass shards.
And I think there's also I don't think it's an either or. I think the marketing message is both. And absolutely, I shouldn't say never, we've all had these conversations, but it's rare to talk to a clinician or a clinical provider who just doesn't really care about the patient benefit. Of course they do. That's why they got into the job they have. So of course that has to be part of the message, because it's real. And it's why we're like Sue, like Sue said, it's part of all of our individual whys, and it's part of the customer's why also. But at the same time, there has to be there has to be a practical application. There has to be a what's in it for me. There has to be these things. Otherwise, as the whole topic of the thing is, the organizational change required to implement it becomes, in many cases, we've all seen it 100 times, insurmountable. So I think it's a mixed message, and I don't think Grady's suggesting. And Joe, I know you know this, but he's not suggesting that that's the only part of the marketing message, but it is a critical part. Am I summarizing that correctly?
I agree. I'm sure Grady agrees. I'm just, as a marketer, I need to have a primary positioning, a primary message. And I understand that there are other benefits that you talked about with other audiences. Just as I think about it in a website landing page above the fold, and you see a picture and you have some words there, are the words "no more getting hurt" or "look what this does for your patients"? Now, I will say that there was a campaign that I did have a client that had multiple constituents, and what we did for them was we had, like, the chief surgeon says, "I use this because this," and then the nurse said, "I use this because this." So they each had a different benefit. I don't know how effective that was, but that's the way we attempted to convey that message.
Who's more likely to see this?
The messaging?
Yeah.
Messaging? Well,
on the target side, is it going to be more the nurse that's worried about getting stuck, or someone concerned about the patients?
Well,
I mean, I know that sounds like it shouldn't be a mix.
For the hospital system, the most important sell is going to be at the value analysis committee level. So Grady, it's financial, operational, and clinical. Clinical, she has. Operational, I guess, is speed and no sticks. And financial is parity with what you're presently paying. Isn't that where you're going, Sue? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure.
And Joe, just to add, wouldn't there also be a benefit to the hospital of, if the nurses are getting stuck, there's got to be these bad repercussions, right? She may say, I've been warning these guys, I got stuck again, I might have gotten infected with something, there's a lawsuit. In other words, does this help prevent that mess too?
Do you think that hospitals know how many times last year a provider got hurt with a needle? Do you think that's tracked anywhere? I don't know.
They would have to for their insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last year, or actually in 2022, 2 million needle stick injuries estimated globally cost hospitals close to $2 billion, or over $2 billion to treat.
Well, I suppose that's a good fact to have if you're in your line of work. Grady, you want to show us that last slide?
No, it's fine. It's just, embracing not being the change has really helped our business. We provide all kinds of population health services to clinical practices, whether it's within a system or independents. And our number one sort of approach has always been, this is the stuff you're already doing. You're just not getting reimbursed for it because you don't have an organized program, right? And that makes the adoption of our doing it for you such a small step that it's an easy step. In other words, in Sue's market, you have to buy the syringe to inject the ampule. You're buying the ampule, you're treating the patient. This is happening 80 million times a day in this market. You're doing it now. Here's just a little bit better way to do it. Your nurses don't get stuck. Your patients don't get glass shards in their lungs. And it's not going to cost you any extra to be a hero, right? Because the financial people, that is going to be their next question. Okay, great. How much extra is this going to cost me? And if Sue can position that as, this is essentially a free way to be a hero, I think the nurses, again, I'm not saying this is a only thing she does, but I think the nurses asking for this will drive that administrator to say, why the heck not? Why would I not be a hero to my nurses who are bringing this to my attention, since it's not going to cost me any extra? We're not really changing any processes. We don't have to have a big town hall meeting with all the employees and explain to them why we're changing what we're doing and so forth. We just start buying Sue's product and quit buying whatever else we've been buying.
Mm-hmm. What says the group? Radical agreement? Dr.
I would
Lee?
say I've got two nurses in my family, my brother-in-law and my sister, and they will pretty much use whatever they are handed.
Mhm.
But one thing they have in common is that they do take an inordinate amount of conscientious pride in the level of care they are able to deliver to their patients.
Mhm.
Nurses are really pressed on every side, schedule efficiency, taking care of stuff the doctors don't have time to do, all kinds of things. Being at legal risk themselves and therefore having to maintain extremely high levels of proficiency. I don't know how much they would push for this product, but I do know that if it was going to, at least if all the nurses were like my sister and brother-in-law, they would eagerly embrace it, even though there would be a lot of matter-of-factness, because they have all kinds of new things which come through their area. But if it doesn't malfunction and it doesn't present an extra risk to anyone else, and it does eliminate the risk of glass shards, they would not stoically embrace it. They would embrace it with a sense of pride. And that's just from those two and all the conversations I've had with them.
Before Scott speaks, I want to know if your sister and brother-in-law met at work.
No, they're not married. My
Oh, okay, two different.
brother-in-law is married to another sister, and
Okay.
Not to each
this
other.
sister-
Fair enough. Scott, you had
Yeah.
something relevant to say.
I was actually just going to peg off of what Rick was saying, because tying it back to our previous discussion, because I think it's instructive to imagine Sue's device. And just so what we've described here is this sort of revolutionary device that can filter glass shards without any extra work on the part of the nurse, and it eliminates finger sticks. And I certainly wasn't part of Grady's conversation with her, so I won't pretend to know the details. But if we take as a thought experiment the idea that Sue has developed this wonderful technique to automatically filter glass shards and keep them from entering the patient's bloodstream, but it's a pain in the neck to use.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you gotta, it's got
Yeah.
three different steps. It's got a fatter needle, and so it hurts more. And sometimes you can't use it on the neonates if they're really low, that kind of thing. Now, all of a sudden, we have a conflict between patient benefit, workflow, and those sorts of deals, right? And all of a sudden, we have introduced headwinds to Sue's sale that we would prefer not to deal with. So just sort of going back to the idea of, what's more important, the clinical benefit or the what's in it for me piece, I don't think as marketers that we need to, and we certainly don't want to separate those. We need to find a way to communicate them all either in the same message, or, as Chris was talking about, even better, different messages for different specific targets in the path for that. So, I was listening to Rick talk about his not married brother-in-law and sister, and thinking, well, yeah, it's an easy decision if the device that we're talking about is, if there's parity on all levels and it's clinically better, why do we even exist as salespeople? But it's the idea that that's not always the case, and we all know that. And so when you have a product like that meets all of those things, I think you're trumpeting every aspect of it that gives you superiority. And I think that goes to what Grady was talking about at the beginning, where in the whole theme of it about, change is hard. Well, if change in the sales world equals headwinds to your sale, it equals objections. So let's eliminate them, which,
I think it's important.
This is what we've done in the cognitive testing.
I think it's important. I think it's important to note too that when you're talking about the glass shards thing, there is the potential for people to take that as an attack on their competency. In other words, if you're injecting glass shards in your patients, you're not doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an easy step to say, well, I'm being attacked, I'm being accused of not doing my job correctly. But, you know, everybody knows I properly filter my ampules, and, you know, I would never inject glass in my patient. It's an easy way to say, yeah, I don't want to have anything more to do with this product. If you separate that out so that the administrator who's not the one doing the injections can look at that and say, yeah, that's a cost, that's a risk, there's a downside to injecting glass that we can now eliminate. The nurse is over here saying, I like the fact that I'm now not going to stick myself when I do an injection. Now you've got people cooperating to get the product adopted.
So this is a space that that I spent my entire last company on, which is why medical devices are adopted. And as you guys are all describing, we're all discussing, this is very multifactorial. And it's individual on the one hand, but it's also population based on the other. It's not black or white. We're not going to either get everybody using this or everybody rejecting it. There's a spectrum of behavior. There's a spectrum of weighing the benefits versus the cost versus the effort. So there's all these variables that interplay to come to the result of what you experience in the market as your adoption rate. Is it, you know, oversimplify, but, you know, for the last 10 years or more, medical devices basically had to either be the same performance at less cost or better performance at the same cost. And all of us in medical device want to do better performance at higher cost and get that premium, things like that. But there are so many variables that it's really hard to break this down into, well, here's what will work or here's what won't work. I still speak, I still advise and teach on my past life expertise of driving medical adoption. And Joe, maybe it'd be very relevant to this group to share the perspective and the tools that we came up with in my old company about how markets adopt, not just how individuals adopt, but how markets adopt. Because then with a couple tools that I could give this group, a couple concepts, all of these different pieces can actually be assembled into a view of a market about why some will adopt and why some won't adopt.
Very interesting. And you are nominated for January 12th.
Okay. I might be in Belize. I got to check my calendar.
That's not my problem.
Okay. We'll take a look.
I have internet in Belize.
Jan?
I am listening to this and thinking of my packaging, because packaging is very important for medical devices, but everybody concentrates so much on the doctor, they forget that the doctor doesn't open the package and try and get it out and use it. And that's been an issue for getting people to think about packaging as being an integral part of the medical device. And it's interesting to me. I just spent last Friday in a hospital getting a medical procedure and talking to
research.
Oh yeah, it was really cool. I was mad they knocked me out
research.
before I could see some stuff I wanted to see.
Mhm.
But the nurses that I talked to were complaining about some of the devices they had to use, not just from packaging, but from the devices themselves. And they didn't even know who to talk to say, I don't like this. And they were asking me who they could talk to while I'm under anesthesia and stuff. So we need to mix this up a little bit better for the marketing, for the people. The people that are selling it aren't actually always talking to the people that are using it either. I like Sue's device because it isn't different. It is a benefit that we have to talk about a lot. No glass shards in people, but that's what you submit to the FDA. That is what you can say, but you need to have a lot of the other stuff underneath saying, this is better for the nurses to use. It makes it easier. Those guys were rushing around so much. And I had male and female nurses. I couldn't believe they were keeping up with the patients the way they were. So they need things that make it easier and safer for them so they can be easier and safer on the patients. And it was just a neat experience having a medical device used on me that I'd actually worked on at one point in time. And it was a nice thing to see. And I am so glad for medical devices because it lets me be up and around in a surgery that would have taken 2 weeks of recovery in the hospital before. And I was out in 24 hours.
Sue, if you don't walk out of here with 10 new investors, I don't know what you're doing wrong.
What I will say to Jan's comment is packaging is really important. So to be safe, it has to be open a certain way. So here's one, but it has to be opened at this end so you can, and I haven't opened
You
this.
can't see when you go down off camera there, how you're opening it.
I'll bring it up. So if it's not open, it has to be opened at a certain end so they can lure lock it into the line, and not touch it and not become aseptic. And I was looking at some other needles opened up, and all it says was open here. So I've added that on, and I can show you here that
And then
opening
Sue,
it up.
if you talk to me later, there's a couple of easy little things that can be done to help reinforce that too.
Yeah, so if it's open here, it can be lure locked right in and you're not touching anything and remaining aseptic. But if you open it from the other side, you're not. And yeah, I would love to talk to you, Jan, about refining this, because I'm sure FDA is gonna kick it back for some of the, I don't know, but I'm hoping they're not, but if they do, it's a detailed conversation we have to have.
Do you guys
those
mind
are
if
the
I
fun
jump
things.
in with a quick anecdote? This is coming from my past life and no real connection to, no direct connection to devices, but I'll connect it in the end. We did a project for DuPont that builds the fiber for Stainmaster carpet. That's a nylon fiber, and it's scalloped, so it deflects light differently than a round fiber does, so it's less likely to show stains. And we did a project where we actually built out a space and walked consumers through the space and then asked them to judge the effectiveness and competence of the attorneys who officed in that space. They have known nothing about them except walking through, seeing the furniture, the legal books on the wall, and so forth. They gave us assessments. We then went through and replaced the worn, dirty, stained, raveling in a couple of places carpet with new Stainmaster carpet, but old enough that it was not, it didn't off that smell of new carpet. Okay. We then walked a separate randomized group through and asked them to assess. Again, they're not asking, what do you think of the office space? We're asking you, what do you think of the competence of these attorneys, right? How would you trust these attorneys to handle your legal issue? And the scores were incredibly higher. I did all the statistical significance analysis and so forth to show, even though we had a fairly small N, we got statistical significance improvement because of this sort of subtle, nothing anyone was conscious of. Nobody was looking around going, oh, these guys have Stainmaster carpet, therefore they're good attorneys, right? That wasn't the assessment, but it was that subtle thing. And I think where Jan's going is when you make your product easy to use by the end user, when that physician or suit in a hospital is asking around, what do you guys think of this device? The feedback they're getting from the end user is, I like product A. Now, why do they like product A? It may just be because it's easy to open and easy to use and they like the packaging, but that's the kind of subtle difference that can create bottom-up demand for a product. And I think, Sue, anything you do to make your product easy, fast, et cetera, is gonna feed that nursing, what do we call that? The force multiplier of the nurses telling their purchasing people or their physicians, like, we need this product. This is a better approach.
It's a really great conversation. Before we close today, I wanted to give Chris a moment because this might be relevant for Sue as well.
Thank you very much. And Sue, we're hosting, we've partnered with Deloitte, one of the investors from Tech Coast Angels, and we're putting on an investor workshop strictly for medical device startups and smaller companies that are either looking for startup funds or growth funds. And the idea was to have a more intimate setting, 15 to 20, entrepreneurs, where a couple of folks are getting up and give you a little information on what you should do before you speak to an investor, how your book should look, all of that. And they're also looking for opportunities. So I just put the link out there. It's an Eventbrite link. It's in, we're going to hold it here in San Diego. It's local in February. It's all local. So yeah, there was just no way to set that up. Deloitte was nice enough they have a very nice facility here in San Diego. So they're hosting it for us. And there's a law firm that's coming in for, IP patent lawyer support, but everything is focused on investment opportunity for the startups and education.
Chris, does it need to be a medical device?
Yeah, that's what they're looking for.
Okay.
or software that would benefit. It doesn't have to be a specific device, but it could be software. And you'll see if you go to the Eventbrite link, it explains what they're looking for. But I've been to enough. Startup San Diego it's a huge event that happens every year here, but it's so vast. You know what I mean? You can get lost down there. So we wanted something specifically for the medical device community to where they would have access to funds and grow their companies. I only did this because I service these startups, and we noticed a lot of them just couldn't get funding. And yet I have conversations with investors that are looking for opportunities. So I thought, okay, let's put them together. So that's why.
Are you working with the J&J entrepreneur group that's down there for medical devices?
No, ma'am. It's strictly independent. I ran into some investors, some Tech Coast Angels, and some financial advisors who work together to support startups. And they were trying to expand from Orange County down to San Diego. So I said, I'll help. So that's where that came from.
I can come to San Diego. My son goes to school there, so it's always a good reason to come.
And what day is it, Chris?
February 15th from 6 to 8 p.m.
Spend Valentine's with your son. I don't know how he's going to feel about that if he's in a relationship. Grady, this was a great conversation. We can continue it on the 12th of January. I hope you and Scott will join us then. Next week.
Thank you, Joe.
That fan favorite Michelle Lott will talk about eStar and its implications for your submissions. And for Joe Hage and Joe Hage Enterprises, this has been Joe Hage. I'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
You, Joe.
Thanks,
Great weekend,
Joe.
everybody.